Hello, Unity community, and welcome to another Unity live stream. Coming at you today with some really exciting stuff. Sound off in the chat. I actually already see where y'all watching from. Really eager to learn about where you are checking us out from. Happy to see some usuals in the chat. So hello, Davina Duckworth. Hello, The Bull over on Twitch. Hello, Menwem. Hello, everybody. So excited to see all of your virtual faces, your usernames. There we go. We'll go with that. But glad to see the usuals. We've got a really awesome one today. We're going to learn some very important information about a aspect of game sales that I think is on everybody's mind if they're planning on actually releasing a game in the near future, or maybe have already released a game. This is something that a lot of people probably think about post-release as well. But first things first, we've got some housekeeping to do. So let's go ahead and jump right into that. And that is all about Unite. So at Unite 2025, reconnect with the Unity community as we return to Spain for 2 full days of learning, networking, and memorable experiences. We'll be showcasing inspiring stories, demos, sessions, our annual keynote, after-hour events, and more. So I dropped the link in the chat. If you want to learn more, go ahead and check out that link or go to unity.com/unite. And as I've mentioned in the past, unfortunately, I will not be able to go to Unite myself this year. So if you are going, please have extra super good fun for me. And if you're staying homebound, remember, we will have Unite live stream stuff. So there's something for everybody. So whether you are sticking at home or you're actually going there, Unite is there for you. So there we go. Super excited for whatever comes from Unite. And with that, let's go ahead and launch in to what we are going to be talking about today. So as you saw right on the tin, this is how to price your game. Now, for me, I thought it was simple as like, just come up with a dollar amount. But it turns out it's a much more complicated question to pose yourself. And it's not just, oh, $4.99, that sounds good. No, it's much more like much more than that. And so let's meet somebody who has come up with the answer to that question and the full explanation behind it. So let's go ahead and say hello to Tom. Let's welcome Tom to the stage.
Hey everybody.
There we go. Hi.
I can see myself. Hope you can see me as well. Yep. Huge pleasure to be here. Very excited to be chatting with you all, and thank you, Joy. Also, thanks for overselling and promising answers. We don't have answers. It's just gonna be more questions. So probably, if all of you enter this live stream being more confused than before, is probably par for expectations, really.
Oh, no. See, the important thing that I think that you're going to bring to this stream, and because I have seen some hints of what we're going to be going over, and some of our audience may as well has seen your previous webinar, it's really important, I think, to actually think deeply about this question and understand that there's so much more to pricing your game than just putting a dollar amount on it, like I thought. And, as aspiring indies, I think it's really important to think about the tactics behind that. So I'm really excited. But first things first, Tom, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your company, IndieBI?
Oh yeah, happy to. So pleasure to meet you, everybody. Happy to see all the faces on the chat. So my name's Tom, as you see. Last name's not really necessary. Nobody can pronounce it anyway. I currently run a company called IndieBI. Some of you may have seen it or been exposed to it at some point in your game development careers. In short, it's a data aggregation platform for all of your sales information, and it is, I think, most importantly, a business that came out from the games industry and is now built for the games industry. It was a solution to problems that I had in my previous life as a kind of the business head of an independent game studio. It started within Superhot, which got to be pretty popular and shipped across all platforms, and that itself started creating problems, trying to get a sense of how many games you're selling on each platform when you're selling on all of them. Turns out it's pretty difficult. So it is kind of a Cadillac problem that when you get to, you've already made it, you're fine, you're gonna be okay. But my role and also the way that I'm built made it so that I couldn't really accept the status quo of just kind of rolling with it. I wanted to really know how our games are doing, and I wanted to know if there's anything that I can do to improve them. So we built a platform to collect all of that sales information, and eventually it spun out, and one thing led to another, and now we're tracking about $3 billion a year in video game sales for all of our clients. We're also directly managing about $1 billion of that. So a lot of that kind of live stream situation today might be like showing some assorted slides and graphics from the webinar, just because we have them and they're pretty convenient to do. So if we could have the slides on screen, and we can then at least mention some of the games that are relevant here, because that's where all of the insights are coming from, really, right? So as I mentioned, IndieBI is managing a pretty big catalog of video games, indie, but also like big indie, like the types of Among Us and Peak and some of Undertale, The Long Dark, like a bunch of the games that and recognize. We help by providing the developers and publishers of those games with sort of data-driven insights on how to price them, how to discount them, what to do to make those games perform better commercially. So a lot of the insights that I want to share through live streams like today is not just vibes and opinions, it's actual evidence that we've got in arguably the largest data set of sales information in the games industry in the world, and that also has been battle tested by applying it on games that you yourself almost certainly have played and enjoyed yourselves. So a lot of the things that we're talking about here is very, very heavily grounded in data, but also, very importantly, your game is not those games. It's not the average game. So take it with a big grain of salt. Like everything that we're talking about here is like caveated with mileage may vary. It's the fact that the average game has some specific distribution on Steam. Like if any parameter that we're talking about here, it's gonna fall on some spectrum. Your game probably is somewhere near the middle, but maybe it isn't. Maybe it's going to be entirely different for your game. So you still have to apply your own context and your own understanding. And that's a part of why answering any question here really is not the point. I hope that it mostly gives you a little bit of starting points, like additional threads to pull when you're trying to figure out your own commercial strategy. And at least it makes you think about commercial strategy in more terms than just pricing, than just how many dollars is your game going to cost.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is such an interesting topic, and one that is really great to see that there's actual data behind. A lot of people feel like they're kind of feeling around in the dark for this. So having real data is such a welcome thing. And as we go through this live stream chat, if you have any questions for Tom about anything on the subject, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We definitely want to have this be a conversation. So if there's something that comes up that is particularly interesting, feel free to ask us to follow up on it, and we will definitely go from there. So with that in mind, let's start with the basics. What's even going on with the market right now? Like, what's going on with Steam? Like, how is everything? What should people who are planning on publishing be thinking about right now about the state of things?
Good. That's a good starting point. I mean, it's a depressing one. So then we can only go up from there, I guess. So I mean, depressing as in it is challenging. It's the best time to make video games. It's the worst time to make video games. That's been the one constant we've always had. People have been talking about indie-pocalypse since about 2014. It was when I started out in the games industry, when the notion of indie-pocalypse first happened, and that was when Steam Greenlight started allowing more than like a couple of releases a week, and there was, oh my god, now the quality will fall down through the floor. We're going to have so much. There wasn't even a name for it, shovelware, I guess. Now we would call it slop, and the actual revenue for the real game developers will implode. Well, as you can imagine, we live in a different time now, and I like to sometimes bring up let's see if I can figure out how to do this with like screen sharing. Yeah, it's gonna work. This is going to work for sure. Might implode, but we'll see. We have Troy behind the scenes doing production, so he might panic. But Trey, if you can bring up my second screen, there we go. So if you guys go to SteamDB, for example, there's a bunch of similar sources of information like this, just analyzing, aggregating publicly available Steam information. And SteamDB happens to have, one of the easiest to consume ways of understanding how dramatic the influx of new titles have been on Steam. So the oft-cited metric is that there's over 10,000 releases every year, so you're competing against 10,000 games. I like to point out that it's not really true, and it's not true in both ways, because it's not really 10,000 releases or more that you're competing each year. Most of the games on Steam that are shipped on Steam, they don't even pass the basic sniff test of Steam allowing them to trade Steam trading cards. So most of those games are not commercially successful enough to get basic Steam features enabled. So they basically ship and then fall into obscurity. If you're working on a game professionally or semi-professionally, you probably want to treat yourself or kind of aim higher. So you're really competing against just a few thousand games each year. So even if you go by number of reviews, you want to remove all of the reviews apart from if you're ambitious, maybe these ones. So you're only competing against 1,000 games, new releases on any year. But then the other mistake when you're looking at a chart like this is that you're assuming you're only competing against these releases. In reality, you're competing against all releases up until that point and all releases that are gonna still ship through the lifetime of your game. So you're still competing against probably tens of thousands of games, but it's gonna be spread over time, and it's something that there's not a lot that you can do about it, but you should be mindful that most of the revenue made on Steam and most of the playtime spent on Steam and other platforms are really no different, is on back catalog releases. So games that have been around for a year, most of it is actually on games that have been around for longer than 3 years. And if you look at financial statements by publishers that disclose that information, and you look up their distribution of like new releases versus back catalog revenue, that is usually 80 to 90% of the revenue comes from back catalog releases. So actionably, there's not much you can do when you're just shipping your game, but the way that I kind of want to or prefer to frame it is that this, at the very least, highlights that you should spend more time thinking and reviewing how your game is positioned against everything that's already been shipped, that already exists on Steam or your platforms of choice by now. And that also your work does not end when your game is shipped, that you have a lot that you can do by managing not just your game's sort of content lifecycle by figuring out updates and patches and DLCs. Those are complicated and highly contextual things that depend on your game, but also just mechanics of like how are you going to be adjusting its pricing over its lifecycle? Are you going to be actively looking over and working on its discounting strategy? Are you going to be reviewing its store page performance, updating assets? Like all of that matters because people will still be potentially interested in your game 2, 3, 5 years from now. And if you stop doing anything about it today, you're probably missing out on about 50% of your revenue potential. So you're probably halving your revenue prospects for your game if you ignore the kind of long tail commercial management that goes into it.
Amazing. So you have already kind of touched on these elements, but for people who are not familiar with the concept, you're touching on the idea of a commercial strategy. What is a commercial strategy? Kind of like from like way up a mile high away. What is a commercial strategy, and why is it important for devs to think about it as they're getting ready to ship their game?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question that doesn't have a simple answer, because we also didn't even have we as an industry, that we're getting into the realm of just academic philosophy at this point. We don't even have shared vocabulary for most of the things that other industries have already figured out 60 years ago. So Trey, if you can put the slides on the screen. Yeah, so simplifying, but I think not simplifying by much. our industry for PC console games assumes that marketing strategy and your go-to-market should basically be make a game, put it on Steam, and that's basically where thinking ends. It's again a little bit simplifying, but I don't think by much in a lot of cases. And regular like marketing frameworks, you open a book from 60 years ago that has already been contested and challenged as overly simplistic and reviewed like 5 times since it was built, and that already acknowledges that when you're building a consumer product, which a video game is, you should be thinking about your pricing strategy, about your promotional strategy, so how you communicate with your audience, like what is your audience in the first place, where are you going to be reaching them, and then a part of that is your product, but then everything else also feeds into that. So it's kind of marketing 101 when you see this diagram with those 4 slices of your marketing strategy, and the important takeaway is that this is showing product as basically equivalent to all of the other 3 pieces. We in PC console games haven't really got to the point where we would be thinking about it at anywhere near even this basic levels of sophistication as an industry. And that is to be clear, like there's no indictment against the games industry. It's just the realization that as an industry, the way that it currently exists, we've only really been around for about 10 years. That before that point of Steam going through its weird green light phase and then eventually allowing self-publishing and the democratization of video game development was a tiny fraction of what it is right now. The industry was entirely different with just a few larger players, really. No notion of kind of the fragmentation and self-publishing explosion that we've had since then. So you've only really had to tackle. We've only really had to tackle and work against the challenges of a competitive market like we have right now for a few years. So we're just starting to find out that, oh, well, maybe if you're in a competitive market, having a marketing-oriented mindset and thinking about customer appeal and having words to discuss this would be worthwhile. So we're just starting to learn all of those things. I think it's inevitable that we will become much more mindful as an industry about it, and there will be much more just kind of cookie-cutter, ready-made articles and books and like university courses about marketing premium PC console video games. But it's going to take a few years for us to get there. And until then, my perspective is that at the very least, if you're a game developer or if you're working in a game studio, you should at least be mindful that the things that you can find that just kind of by osmosis, looking at random blog posts on Reddit or somebody's Twitter thread about how they made their games, this is not the totality of insight about marketing and commercial strategy for your game that you should be thinking about, really.
Absolutely. Great. So do you think that this is something that game developers should try and tackle on their own, or do you foresee a future where there's a dedicated person on the team who's managing all of the marketing end while everybody else is working on the game?
It's a sliding scale, I think. So from perspective, like the convenient thing about game publishing that we benefit from unknowingly, we just take it for granted, is that at least the distribution platforms are fairly centralized. Like Steam is the de facto monopoly for game distribution on PC, and then you can figure out self-publishing if you have the resources for it on PlayStation and Switch and Xbox, and you're basically done. Like there is a world of additional depth you can find in e-tailers and dedicated regional distributors, especially for some more hermetic regions like China. But if you just do Steam, that's already plenty fine. And if like managing just one platform effectively, that is something that you can do like Pareto principle, 80% as good as anybody else by just spending 20% of the effort. Just being mindful of all of the different tools and all of the tactics that you should be applying to it. And then even if you're a solo developer, you can handle that. You can. It's maybe something you don't want to do and you want to offload it onto your operations person or a marketing person, like a business person, but you can do it if you want to. It is, I think, in many ways, right now a bigger challenge to really find a good resource that shows you what good looks like, what you should expect of yourself or the person that's supposed to be handling this on your team, than it is to actually do it. It's more just setting the bar than actual execution right now.
That's great. And that's actually really heartening for like solo developers, that this is actually something that's accomplishable. So we do have a few questions that have come in through the chat. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. So user not taken over on Twitch asked, do you agree that the first year of release, you shouldn't make a sale for more than 20% unless it is a special occasion? And I know we'll be talking about sales in a little bit as well.
That's an interesting perspective, and it's not an isolated one. So that's a very cool question to have. Let's see if I have a good slide for it or something relevant. Really, I do have some slides. So how about this one? The unfortunate or fortunate reality of platforms like Steam, but also all of the other platforms, is that customer expectations are already set. Like, you can't really, unless you have both a sort of category leading position and balls of steel, really, you can't try and fight against customer expectations successfully. So if you're Factorio, you can maybe get away by saying, we're never going to be discounting our game. It's just going to be full price. This is what we believe the game should cost, and therefore buy it or don't buy it. They've never done a sale, so it's also impossible to disprove. You can't point at any actual evidence to say that maybe they should be actually following a more robust discounting schedule like everybody else. But they've been successful, so at least you can say you can be as successful as Factorio if you try and go and do it like them. But there's also kind of a counterexample of Satisfactory has actually made more money than Factorio, maybe in part because they are not against what feels like the more sort of baked in and aligned with customer expectations strategy for pricing and discounting. So top line, not discounting at all. Controversial, and I don't think you should try for that unless you feel extremely strongly and you manage to get that category leading position where people will buy your game anyway. In terms of depth, so discounting in general beneficial. The usual advice that we give to users and clients of IndieBI, and in IndieBI you also have like a module for discount scheduling that helps you fill your discounting schedule so that it's easier to track cooldowns, and it kind of detects opportunities and whatnot. And we build it because all of the research that we've got and all of the evidence that we've got indicates that making and ending up with more days on discount, so basically trying to fill in as many discounting opportunities as possible as a starting point, is a much better strategy than starting from an empty calendar and then only supporting like key opportunities, big releases for new content and whatnot. So it is on balance. And again, we're talking averages here, so your mileage might vary, but probably not a lot in this case. It is better to spend more time on discount, and it is better to have more frequent and longer discounts if you can line them up. So you still want to make sure that you have the ability to fiddle with your schedule to support your content releases or your big campaigns. But if there's nothing else going on, you should still have a discount if you can afford to do it. So scheduling wise, try to do as many discounts as possible, even in your first year after release. Like it's really hard to get to a point, or like to get to the level of success where people will be buying your game no matter what, even at full price. In reality, and in almost all cases, you see a very steep drop off after your first month, after your release month, and then you only really see significant boosts in sales and also popularity of your game if you do discounts on platforms like Steam and Switch in particular, but all of the other ones apply as well. It's just more complicated to set up discounting schedules in those cases. Depth, though, that is like it varies. So it's basically depth is more a function of your own game. There's no cookie cutter principle there. On Steam, there's just a threshold of 20% is when wishlist notifications go out. So anything shallower than 20% doesn't convert as well. But after that, like anything deeper is dependent on your game, the composition of your wish list, the price that you've got, whether the discounting depth breaks any psychological barriers. So like if it pushes your game under $10, then that almost inevitably will result in a significantly higher upside and uplift from that discount than just doing like an $11 sale. So in an ideal scenario, we spend time just fiddling with it and experimenting with different depths and trying to make sure that your like wish list numbers stay more or less stable during discounts. That is a good sort of rule of thumb, but still like just trying to make it so that your discounts are as effective as possible in generating additional revenue and units for your game. I guess that's always good. Like that's kind of what you're building games for.
Amazing. So we'll have one more question before we dive in a little bit more to discounting. And this is coming from John A. Bruce on YouTube. And I think this really, goes well with the idea of customer expectation. Does price itself imply a promise of quality?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a big part of why just trying to figure out the answer to the question of pricing through a single price point, just USD price point, is so hard because it's price is correlated with everything else that you do. And like, let's see, there's a nice chart for this. Like there is a correlation with something. So if you take successful games on Steam, so the ones that have made, that have more than 500 reviews, you try to look at what was their launch year revenue. More expensive games make more money. So there is a correlation in the fact that more expensive games are commercially more successful on balance if you look at it from a certain perspective. But that also, like when you think about it from the perspective of a customer, so you yourself buy games. If you're buying a $49.99 game, like there's no limit, but let's say you buy a $60 game, you have a specific expectation of what that game will be. And if you're a 4-person team working on a side-scrolling Metroidvania, it's probably not gonna be a $60 game. You're probably not gonna price it like that. So there is a lot of kind of self-correlation in whether a game and how big of a commercial success can a game expect if it is successful, and the price point that it's going to eventually take. But that is also dependent on the production quality and the budgets that you've got and the marketing budgets behind it and the customers' expectations that you've got and the traction and everything else around it. So price is really downstream from a lot of different parameters, a lot of different aspects of your game. So I forgot what the question actually was halfway through. Hope that kind of covers. Price is
it absolutely does. Yeah, does price equal quality expectations in the user's mindset? I think you did cover it absolutely. And what I keep hearing here is there's like a little bit of psychology that's going into these thought processes. And, like you mentioned here, like think about it from your own perspective. Like when you buy a game at a certain price point, what are your expectations? And I think that's a really great call out to kind of pull yourself out of the mindset that you might have where like, okay, I'm going to make a game. It's going to be $19.99 and that's how it's going to be. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. And, like looking at the chatter on Twitch, there's a question about discounting strategy for multiplayer games, and then a small conversation about the fact that AAA games that are old are now $5 when they're on discount versus like Silksong, which is $20 because it's new. So like there's a lot that goes into not just the sort of pricing and discounting strategy when you think about it in isolation, in like right now and a little bit from now. It's also a thing that you have to be mindful is highly time dependent, and basically from a customer's perspective, the fact that you don't want to buy a game at full price today does not necessarily mean that you're going to buy it 90% off next week. And you might actually, conversely, buy it next week for full price if, for example, it's a multiplayer game, and multiplayer games which are successful have a network effect. So it's your friends are going to be playing it. You want to play it with your friends, you're going to buy it. So it's the customer appeal and the customer demand changes over time. So the aspect of pricing and discounting strategy and a little bit of why the denser and more regular discounting schedule usually works better is that it also provides customers with an opportunity to buy the game at a price that they are prepared to pay more frequently. So they might be currently playing Silksong, so they're not really interested in whatever discount you've got for your game, but they're going to be done with Silksong in a few weeks. They're going to be looking for the next game. So maybe if in a few weeks you've got your game on discount again, that's when they're going to actually buy it.
And that's actually a really great transition back to the conversation about discounting strategy. It seems like the idea is that you shouldn't just stick to discounting your game like once or twice a year. It seems like there's a lot of thought process put into that. Can you talk a little bit about what a good discounting strategy looks like throughout the course of a year?
Yes. Hold up. Let's see if we have a slide that is adjacent to that. We've got a slide that is somewhat adjacent. So let's look at this. Is this a good slide?
It's definitely a fancy looking slide.
Yeah, this is a decent slide. So this isn't specifically about what a good strategy looks like. This is the contrast between cohorts of games. One cohort of game with what we would label inefficient discounting, and the other with what we would say is optimal discounting, but really is just a sort of best effort, like maximizing days on sale. So this is the optimal discounting is just above a certain threshold of the number of days on discounts spent during the course of a year. Inefficient discounting you can think of as basically just participating in seasonal sales and the odd like invite to a publisher sale. So the actual difference is somewhere around 80 days on discount between the two groups. Because on Steam, the maximum you can do is usually about 140, 145. So almost half the year spent on discount if you set the schedule correctly. So that's the maximum. And it's not necessarily, you don't necessarily want to hit the maximum. Like there are valid reasons for you to sacrifice some days on discount during a given year because you're lining up those opportunities to support your strategy. So there are legitimate reasons why you might want to have a more bespoke, more customized calendar. But in general, you're striving for those kind of longer, like more intensive discounting schedules. So you try and start with discounts which try and spend as much time with custom discounts as possible. So on Steam, you can do week-long sales, but you can also do 14-day-long sales, and those are more effective on balance. You've got cooldown rules that if you kind of read them and put together a spreadsheet that allows you to time those different custom discounts pretty effectively. Again, like if you don't want to, IndieBI has the discounting advisory module that just calculates all of the cooldowns for you. And you can also take advantage of the fact that seasonal sales, so those big summer, winter, autumn sales, they don't trigger cooldowns. So you can actually attach your own custom sales to those longer sales. So in short, effective discounting strategy just means that you're again spending a lot of time on discount, and that you are aware and taking advantage where reasonable for you of all of the different opportunities that you have for putting your game on discount. And the chart that you see here with the difference, that is normalized revenue for those two cohorts of games. So just by discounting alone, just by the difference in discounting strategy alone, that is almost doubling long tail revenue for titles on Steam. And those are extreme cases, right? So you will probably have a slightly better discounting strategy just kind of by default if you're doing anything about your game than optimal. So you're probably not going to see doubling of your revenue by improving your discounting strategy. But we did crunch the numbers recently, and the average that we saw for like the median publisher on Steam was about 26% revenue opportunity, revenue improvement opportunity. So just by fixing discounting alone, about half or more publishers on Steam would see at least 26% additional revenue that they could get. So pretty substantial when you think about the scale of things. And there's a whole conversation that we could get into, that if everybody is discounting effectively, then does that mean that nobody's discounting effectively? Does it just raise the bar? But we're not there yet. So we're still, you guys adjusting your discounting schedules is just going to be a net benefit for you. And I got the philosophical conviction that everybody fixing the discounting schedules would just mean that customers have a better deal for premium games, and they would just buy more games on Steam rather than going to Pirate Bay and finding them on torrents.
Excellent. And, it's really interesting to see how discounting actually does, translate into better sales and therefore more money, because I think some people who are first starting out get the sense that, oh, if you're discounting your game, you're losing money, right? But that's definitely, it appears based on these charts that that's certainly not the case.
No, it's we're yet to see a game that would be both commercially successful and niche enough to a point where it would saturate its market. But across Steam's player base, which is constantly shifting and growing, so you have to also be mindful that Steam having, I can't remember, like it was 120 monthly active users, something 120 million monthly active users. It was some silly number like that. First of all, you're not going to sell enough to make a dent in that. And second, it's not all the same users all the time. So it's also people are shifting and changing and churning away. So if your audience is in any way mainstream adjacent, like it doesn't need to be mainstream audience, but if it's not extremely hyper niche, then you will be very unlikely to saturate it. Like we see games that have been selling very well for over like 8 years at this point. And they still see just consistent upsides and consistent uplifts from doing discounts. You see a little bit of decay as the competition improves and as there's more options for customers in their genres or in their categories, but it's not at all correlated with them discounting. Some of them have wish list numbers growing up actually, even 8 years after the release.
Excellent. All right, we've got a few more questions from the chat that I want to get in front of you. So on YouTube, the Bull asks, how does the price change for games that are meant to be played co-op? Do you want a lower price barrier to gain a larger player base?
Yeah, I think yes. I think so. It's one of those customer psychology questions that there is when you try to think about your model at a different sort of value perception when you're thinking about buying a game to play by yourself, for yourself, like you're just sitting on your couch and you have a weekend to spare and you're trying to select a game to play. The psychology of it and the incentive structure is a bit different than when you're looking for a game to play with your friends. So like the second scenario is more like selecting a board game, where if you're buying a board game, you sometimes don't mind that it's going to cost you like $50 and you're probably only going to play it once during game night. So in those situations, I'm not saying that you should be thinking about co-op games as potentially more expensive, but it's one of those where if you make it so that you can think of buying the game with copies for all of your friends that you want to play it with for like $20, and that it sometimes makes it basically an impulse purchase, right? So Peak, when Peak launched, it was discounted 38% to be just above the $5 threshold in US and above, below a couple of other psychological thresholds in other markets. And Peak was a fantastic game across many different dimensions. So it's not something that you can easily just assume you're going to repeat. But that psychological barrier of this is just $5. And the discount is already pretty deep anyway. It's like 38%. Like, how much deeper does it have to get for me to buy it? That made it so that I think more people were incentivized to just grab it, including copies for their friends. Basically, it was just, let's just buy it and play it this weekend because why not? It's just $20.
Yeah, I think that absolutely has happened to most people. As a matter of fact, like that even happened to me this weekend where, I had a group of friends like, oh, let's play a game. Well, let's go on Steam and just like buy something that looks appealing. And then I think that actually dovetails nicely with our next question from chat. On YouTube, Johnny Bruce asks, is the price the true barrier? Or is it really more about time and appeal? Because do lots of customers just buy games that they don't get around to playing? Is price really the question here? Is that the barrier that we should be worried about?
Yeah, it's one of those questions, exactly. But that's a big point that I also try to make in like many talks like this. That the first hurdle that you need to jump over is convincing a customer that they even want to spend the time to play your game, and that is already just a heroic endeavor in most cases. There's so many other things that they can be doing instead of playing your game. So if you can't figure out how to make your game appealing to those customers to a point that they would want to spend the time on it, then it doesn't matter what you price it. Like, they're not going to buy it anyway. If you price it free, they would not care. So price is a kind of a second thing to consider before, like after you've already figured out a good enough, like a best you can effort to convince customers that your game is appealing enough to spend the time on it. and then like price is another factor. So like it's one way to think about it is that the customer appeal is a concept of like basically your store page. When you've got a customer, potential customers looking at your store page, statistically you can assume they're goldfish. They know nothing about your game apart from what they see on the store page, but they have some context of the wider market, right? So they understand what a $40 game looks like, what a $10 game looks like. They understand what is a good publisher, for example, if there's a publishing label attached to the game. They understand like, you know, the general genres and concepts. If you're doing if you're making a game that is not unique but rather an execution of some existing ideas, your customers will probably understand it. So you've got goldfish, but they understand that it's gamer goldfish basically.
So smart goldfish.
Smart gamer goldfish in front of your store page, and then whatever you've gotten on your store page. So initially you're going to start out with just your screenshots and your trailers and your store page copy. That has to be as appealing as you can make it. So a mistake that I see still way too often is developers putting the store page up and then somehow forgetting that they can update it. That's just whatever was the first stab at writing copy on the store page and the first screenshots, that's what it's going to be until release date, which is probably not the best it can be. So that's one sort of feature, one parameter you can tweak and work on. You can try different copy, you can try different screenshots, trying to make it so that you're highlighting different aspects of your game. If you find that your game didn't resonate as a puzzle game, maybe highlight the story and mystery and adventure aspect of it. Like there's different ways that you can think about the same game and the same basic concept, but explaining it so that the emphasis is placed different, right? So store page, copy, assets, that's important. But then when you release it, price is another thing that contributes to that appeal. Like it is more appealing to feel like you're getting a deal, right? So an expensive game that is deeply discounted, that's just more appealing than an expensive game. If you've got a recognizable publishing label, then that contributes something to that appeal. Like it's anybody's guess if it's a lot or if it's a little, but it's something. And then once your game is actually shipped, then the social proof of the review score and more importantly, actually the review count. So how many people have already played this game? That often becomes so dominantly overpowering that it doesn't matter what's on the website anymore. It doesn't matter what's on the store page. But when you're starting out, you don't have the reviews, you don't have the review score. So the only thing that customers can resonate with and can find appealing is what's on the store page.
Gotcha. Excellent. Now, I know that we were going to talk about a little bit later, but somebody did ask about regional pricing and whether or not Steam does a good job of that. So I don't know if you want to jump into talking about that, because I know that you have some opinions on that front.
No, they're dog shit. They are bad at, and it feels like a planted question because they are so bad at regional pricing. And to be clear, no fault of their own, apart from they find themselves victims of circumstance as well, where let's do this, and then let's do like this. Yeah, this works. So Steam basically updated the original pricing recommendations once, at this point, like 3 years ago. And they did commit, in a way, they still have a blurb in their guidelines that they will try updating regional pricing recommendations more frequently. And that they take into account economic realities, purchasing power parity, and a lot of clever stuff. But I'm pretty sure that they fell into the trap of not being quite sure where their involvement in the marketplace would start being seen more as price fixing than just being an impartial provider of like a channel of distribution. So I'm pretty sure they found themselves unable to act as actively on regional pricing as they wanted to, and they kind of leave it to publishers, which unfortunately makes it so that you feel like you should be following Steam's regional pricing recommendations. And if you do, they're not too bad, apart from some issues, but they're also not great, and you are actually sacrificing quite a bit of your potential audience. The biggest culprit is always Polish zloty. So in Poland, we end up paying for a lot of new games more than virtually anybody else on the planet. Like this is, what is it, Outer Worlds 2 in Polish zloty is about 13% more expensive than in the US. No
wow.
good reason for it. There's absolutely no valid reason for it. We're not that wealthy. That's, the only countries that are regularly more expensive are Switzerland, basically. Israel sometimes depending on exchange rates, but Switzerland is basically the only country on the planet that pays more for video games than Poland. And that is both just kind of an annoying thing for Polish customers, but it does also translate to Polish customers being less likely to buy your games, especially if they're on the more expensive side. So this is more prominent. The issues that stem from this are more prominent for more expensive games, because if a game is just a good game and it costs a little bit more, but the base price in USD is like $10, it's gonna be fine, but still a little bit annoying to Polish customers. But for expensive games, it becomes an issue. And if you fix it, because you can fix it by yourself by just adjusting regional prices, fixing it in Poland is already going to be plenty. If you want to, you can fix it, and you should be fixing it across all of the other regional currencies as well. Like just kind of trying to apply common sense or asking AI even for recommendations based on purchasing power parities, or getting like purchasing power parity, like the Big Mac indexes for regions, and then applying them. That is good enough, and that takes just a couple of hours to do decently. But even just dropping prices in Poland by a little bit is already plenty. And if you do it, and Trey, if you can put the slide on the screen. So mileage may vary again, as always, but what you can expect is that your revenue in Polish zloty will grow by sometimes a significant margin, and it will come at no cost for any of the other regions. It's just going to be that Polish people will now be more likely to buy your game, and that will just be additional customers for you. Those people would either normally not buy your game, they would wait for a deeper discount, or they would go and play it on torrents, because that's, in a way, a lot of people in Poland feel justified to go and torrent games that are mispriced, because it just doesn't feel right to be paying more for especially AAA productions than anybody else in the world. So you do end up with quite a lot of extra revenue, and for large games, because it goes on and on and on for all of eternity, basically, for all of your future sales, this can amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional revenue. And it costs you, sometimes if you just fix Poland, like 15 minutes, and sometimes if you want to do it properly across all regions and all platforms, maybe a day, maybe half a day to fix, and it just keeps benefiting and keeps accruing benefits for you over time.
Fantastic. And it's funny that you bring up, like, if your game is mispriced, then people will tend to torrent it more in that case, because we actually did have a comment or a question come up in the chat about how does pricing actually affect piracy. And it seems like through what you just mentioned, there is a pretty strong tie with mispriced games, or games that are perceived as more expensive, is going to have a higher chance of the game being pirated. Would you agree that's the case?
Yeah, absolutely. But also piracy is going to be, for single player games that are easy to pirate, it's gonna be loads anyway. There's just going to be a type of a customer who's price sensitive to a point where they feel more comfortable, and they don't mind the extra effort and the risk and the murky morality of going to Pirate Bay and getting your game over torrents. And a lot of that contingent of piracy enabled customers, piracy enabled players, they're not gonna buy your game anyway. It's just they're not gonna want to spend money on it, because they play all their games on torrents. They only go and buy games for money if there are no other options, basically. So that the only types of games that can kind of get away from significant piracy are either highly DRM constrained, which is then unpopular with regular customers because it is problematic, or multiplayer. Multiplayer is the way to go for eating into a lot of that sort of piracy audience that you would normally just always have under the radar.
Gotcha. So it's not really you're not losing a customer in that case, right? Because they were never going to be a customer in the first place.
Pretty much. But it's more that legitimate customers that want to spend money on your game, if the game is overpriced, they will add it to their wish list. And then if they don't see the game show up at the time when they want to buy it, if they lose interest over time, if it doesn't get discounted quickly enough, they will just never play it. They will go and play something else, watch your game on Twitch, and move on. So that's more that it's not necessarily going to be sacrificing your customers to piracy. It's more that they're just not going to want to play your game anymore. It's just too expensive for them. I see a comment from Glenn Rue on Twitch that 90% of Glenn's users are pirates, which is actually very typical. It's when I looked at a couple of numbers, because you have to have in-game telemetry to be able to quantify. So there's no widespread data set trying to quantify piracy, but the few that I've seen where it was just in-game telemetry built by developers, it was about 10-1 every single time. It's just nothing you can do about it.
So it's just part of the whole process of selling your game then?
Feels like it. So piracy feels like basically unavoidable for single-player games. It's something you just accept that there's going to be customers that will want to play your game, but will not. They don't buy games as a general rule, basically. The thing that you can try and sort of work towards with that contingent, with that cohort of your audience, is looking for ways to convert them back to legitimate customers. So if you have your single-player game and you can afford it, then it's weird and it's controversial, but having a launcher for your game, or in-game having your main menu also be as kind of an advertising surface for yourself, right? So you've got your DLC or the next game that you're releasing or something like that, call out to wishlist your next release, or just bundle with other game that allows you a chance to convert some of them back to legitimate customers. So there is some benefit to it, and you can work around it. But again, those customers are almost all they just don't buy games as a general principle. So don't expect that it's going to be 10xing your revenue if you add a DLC call out in your menu.
Fair enough. Excellent. All right. So we did hop over discussing bundling in order to get to regional pricing. And so let's go ahead and kind of revisit that, because I think it's really interesting. Can you talk about first of all, context that what is bundling in the first place, and where does the value come from in bundling your game?
Mm-hmm. So bundling most impactful on Steam. You can basically put together bundles, which is going to be your game and more games, or your game and DLCs on other platforms. And you should do it if you have the resources to do it. Why not? But Steam makes it virtually trivial to make it so that your store page also has that bundle section. And on Steam, you've got there's going to be free best performing bundles on top, and then you can have as many bundles as you want. So there's games that have 70 bundles set up, and you can click in and you see all of the different bundles that they are part of. And Trey, if you put the slide on screen, so there's two aspects to it. One is that when you're launching a game, that sort of additional way of upselling things gives you an opportunity to basically, if you have your own catalog already, right? So if you're a publisher and you're publishing your own games, you have other games that you might want to sell. If your game is a sequel, you might try and sell your original game as well to new customers. But also if it's just your first game, you're a solo developer or a small team, if you can make cross-publishing bundles with other developers, that can also give quite good results. And by that I mean an example here, which was a very decent indie release, which had a very, very good, strong discount bundling strategy. They had cross-publisher bundles with a few similarly popular games with quite a lot of audience overlap. They made over a fifth of their revenue through those bundle sales. And a lot of that is incremental. It's not all incremental, but a lot of this is incremental. And at the very least, even like in terms of like the value of it, customers that bought the game in a bundle, they feel like they got a better deal. Like they got the other game as well. They have better a better relationship with the game to start with. So incremental revenue at start, and then even way after release, working on your bundles actively, like looking at what performs well, looking at what doesn't perform too well, trying to negotiate those cross-publisher bundles with other friendly game developers with decently matched games, and by that I mean games which have some audience overlap, where you feel like, oh, people playing that game, a lot of them would like to play my game as well, and similar in size, where you won't see a benefit or you won't see a lot of upside if your game is 10 times larger already than the other game. And also, the other way around, you will probably not be very successful getting your game featured if you go and ask Balatro for a bundle. Like, it's going to be very selective, and you probably want to be more or less matched in strength, so there's mutual benefit to all parties. But if you do it, and if you're successful, you end up with on this chart to the left, it's an actual bundle that was added, I don't know, like 5 years after the original game released. And you can see that when the successful bundle was added, which was again well matched, the client saw about 20% improvement in long tail revenue for a very successful game already. So it's substantial amounts of additional revenue just by negotiating a good bundle with a friendly developer. The other example, like the one on the right, is just a similar attempt, but the bundle wasn't matched very well, so it didn't do anything. And it's just an argument that in those situations, bundles can really only be additive. Like, at worst, it's not going to do anything, and you can then recycle that slot, basically say, well, it's not working, let's go and find something else and replace it, and maybe eventually you're going to find something that works like the one on the left. So you got yourself 20% of additional revenue for basically free.
So it's essentially a zero risk operation, right? Like, at worst, yeah. Great. Mm-hmm. Now, on that front, though, there is a perception where if you bundle your games, you could risk your review scores dropping. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So there was a short conversation when I was giving this talk on a webinar, and one of our indie game developer friends mentioned that they actually had a bundle that they felt didn't do much, and then also there was audience mismatch, and they felt like maybe it impacted their review scores. So I chatted with Andrew afterwards, and we looked into the actual numbers. And even in that case, where they felt, well, that was so bad that it impacted our review scores, there wasn't actually the case of a bundle not performing. It was just that the game was freshly released, and it was its first winter sale, which exposes the game to more mainstream audience in general. So then that's usually kind of a very fraught period when you're over-indexing on the review score and not on the number of reviews, because it's the first time, your first big sale, when more people are going to be coming into your community, and not all of them are going to like your game. The game is fantastic, and most people liked it, so it was just a drop of a few points, but they felt like, oh, maybe that's because of the bundle. It wasn't because of the bundle. So it's actually like both over-indexing on review scores is not really usually the best strategy. It's you can make bad decisions by feeling like you should not show your game to more people because maybe they won't like it. You should show it to as many people as possible. And some people will like it, some people won't, but it's more important how many reviews you got than what is the actual review score. So it was a little bit of that. And then also just a kind of a misinterpretation where they attributed the actual change in review scores to the bundle, not to being on the first major sale.
Gotcha. So the answer then is the more eyes, the better, and bundles can only help with that idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. All right. We got a question in the chat from YouTube on John A. Bruce again. How should early access affect the price of your game?
There's no good answer, really. It depends on the early access. It's what we usually advise is to to basically get as quickly as possible to a point where you can treat your early access, your early access period, as if your game is already a fully fledged released game, basically, because the customer expectations are such that early access is no longer really the free flowing beta period where you can afford to make the game bad and then fix it later. If your early access is bad, then it makes it very hard to climb out of it. So our advice is usually to treat it like an in development game, that you've got a content pipeline and you've got a production workflow that takes feedback from customers much more into account, and you've got much more active community management, sure, but it's still a game that should stand on its own, and therefore like your discussions of pricing and like discounting, they shouldn't shift too much between your early access period and the 1.0 release. So like as an example that I see very, very frequently, aversion to discounting your early access, like the argument or like the reasoning that your game is in early access, so it's only gonna get better. So maybe you want to hold off on discounting so that people that see it, they see the best version of the game after it's released. That universally, from looking at the data, seems like a bad decision. It's just that you keep losing momentum and traction and popularity over time. So the longer you're not discounting the game, the longer you're not promoting it, the more of the people that were originally interested in it lose interest whatsoever. It's somebody wishes that your game when it first launched into early access, but then they don't necessarily care about your content updates, about your patch notes, but they would get a notification if the game went on discount. You just haven't used that tool. So then when you actually launch the game a year and a half from then, they already forgot what the game was supposed to be about.
Got it. Excellent.
Yeah.
You touched on this a little bit earlier, but just to go back, so on YouTube, NullX numbers is doing deeper discounts more than 20% worth it, or do they end up making you similar dollar amounts?
Oh yeah. It's again contextual, very dependent on the game itself. So every game will have different kind of sweet spot, and also it is situational in that if you have like Steam recently has been experimenting more and more with like a deep discount section where they give you extremely good promotional spots, and it's only really for sort of older games that are still selling very, very well. But there is a threshold, like a very deep threshold of the discount level that you need to do. But those deals tend to make like an order of magnitude more uplift than regular sort of 50-60% off discounts that those games normally do. So there's extreme cases, and then also just on a kind of a regular sort of day-to-day basis. For some games, you will just see if you experiment that you've done a 20% off and then you've done a 40% off, and you don't see much difference, and that. Usually, like if that's what's happening, that means that you've won, like your category leader. People are buying your game no matter what the price point is. In most cases, you will see uplifts, and then like there are depths to which you can go where it clearly makes no sense. You're not making any more money. You're maybe moving more units, but you're starting to lose money. But that's already way too deep. Like ideally, you want to end up somewhere where you're not depleting your wish lists too rapidly, so you still have demand kind of on an ongoing basis, that you're maximizing your revenue without sacrificing your long tail, basically. So there is kind of a sweet spot, but usually for most games that is still pretty deep. Like that's usually like 50-60%, I would say, and that again contextual. Cheaper games don't need to discount that much. More expensive games need to discount more steeply. If you're talking about like Steam summer sales or like big tentpole sales, that's a different conversation from custom sales, because if there's a tentpole sale, like a seasonal sale going on Steam, then all the games are on discount. So if your game still costs $30, then most customers will look at it and say, yeah, but like for $30 I can buy like 6 other games now. So I'm gonna wish list it and maybe look at it later. So if you're looking for significant uplifts on like Steam summer sale, you probably want to aim for lower effective price points after discounts. If it's a custom discount, you can maybe get away with shallower ones, and you can still kind of fiddle and modify it.
Excellent. And just in the chat, a comment from Alex Leonard Crea. Just awesome talk so far. Thank you. So our users are really enjoying. So as we give a chance for more questions to come in, I think it's time that we ask the bigger question. So you've talked about, regional pricing. We've talked about bundling strategy, marketing strategy, or commercial strategy rather. But at the end of the day, what are the considerations for actually getting to that price point of your game? Like, what do you need to think about when you do eventually have to come up with that number for your game?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's basically everything. Yeah, so it's also like, unfortunately, it's everything, but also from like the realistic experience, the lived experience of being in the industry. Most of us have a good intuition. Like, what a game, like a $20 game looks like. What a $10 game looks like. You've got a fairly decent expectation for what your game is going to look like. So you can usually, just by vibes, position it more or less correctly. So usually for like base price selection, so when you're talking about like pricing your game, the default that most people think about is what is going to be in USD. And that's a very good starting point. You start by USD. I think critically, you then need to make sure that you've also thought about your regional pricing and what your discounting strategy is going to be moving forward. And like if you've got any DLC plans or any bundling strategy around it, like there's a lot of things that you should factor into it. And you should think differently about pricing your games if they're like multiplayer, like we talked about. If it's a co-op, like four-player friend swap game, it's probably worthwhile to go for something that's cheaper because you want to sell 4-packs. Basically, you want for people to consider what is 4x this price rather than individual purchases. If it's a single player game, it's a different conversation. So there's a lot of things that go into it. But then at the end of the day, if you got to a point where you're trying to figure out if your game is like $19.99 or $24.99, your intuition is probably correct in narrowing it down to like two or three price points, basically. If you want to go be very methodical about it and you can afford, like if we can have the slides on the screen again, you can do your homework by going to websites like Gamalytic, for example, is fantastic for like giving you an understanding and a breakdown of Steam games like commercial performance, and then you can slice it up so that you feel like you've got your list of comparables, like the list of games which feel like they share audience with yours. And hopefully it's not going to be one-to-one, like unless that's your strategy. Like you usually, when you're making games, you're trying to find something which is going to be a little bit different from everything else that's been done before. But critically, or like less terrifyingly, you have some overlap with other games that have already been released before. So you make a list. You want to make the list so that it's representative. So not just, you're making a deck builder, so you select Slay the Spire and Monster Train. That's not representative. There's like 500 other deck builders that just are less successful, but you should pull at least some of them into your analysis. And then when you just look at them, analyze what they're doing, what were they priced, how they performed, you can build a good intuition of what is your audience going to expect of your game when you're pricing it at different levels. And by default, you feel like, oh, you should price more or less where everybody else is. But if there are outliers, like I think this chart is for like vaguely FPS puzzle games, a selection of some FPS puzzle games, like a first-person perspective puzzle games. There was not a lot of shooting, and like they're usually they're like $25 or $30. So it's usually in the puzzle game section. But then some games are like $40. There's a couple that are even more expensive, but like the $40 range, if you actually look at it in Crunchyroll, like there's The Witness, and The Witness did amazingly well for the category. So if your game is high, like closer in production quality to The Witness, then maybe you can go and like make it more expensive. Maybe that's something that you can get away with. And again, with that heuristic we had at the beginning, where more expensive games generally can expect making more money. If you're uncertain and if you legitimately don't know, then going for the more expensive option, like the more expensive price point that you're considering, might actually be better, because you can easily go down and do deeper discounts, and even kind of price it lower. Like you can down adjust the price over time. But adjusting it is almost universally too terrifying. Like if your game is successful, let's be real, you're not gonna want to price it high. You're not gonna want to break it. Nobody that I know of, and we've seen no data points, would increase the price of their game just because it was successful. They feel like maybe we can make some more money. So starting from a higher price point, if everything else is equal, which it usually isn't, like let's be clear, but if everything else is equal, then considering a higher price point might actually be the better option for you.
Great.
But going with your vibes is also usually good.
The one instance where vibes really is the good answer, I think is great. But I think that's such an important call out right there, is that, if you start high, you could always go lower. I think maybe there's this perception when it comes to pricing your game is that you're making the final decision about how much your game is going to cost. And obviously, like conceptually as gamers, we know that's not true, right? We see games that launch at $60 and then, they go down in price over the years. So I think there's definitely something to be said about not living in fear about making the wrong choice when you're first launching.
Yeah, absolutely. I see a question in YouTube chat. What was the name of the website to compare? So Gamalytic, you can just Google it. It's basically, there used to be Steam Spy. Sergey, who made Steam Spy back in the day, he moved on to do other things, also fascinating and exciting. Nowadays, the best I would recommend is Gamalytic for Steam intelligence, and it's literally just a website where they scrape all of Steam in terms of publicly available information, and they've got decent enough estimations for wishlist counts and revenues for games based on basically ranking position in top charts. And like I can attest that looking at we see quite a lot of actual numbers for quite a lot of publishers and developers. The numbers on Gamalytic for Steam, they're pretty good. They're good enough for virtually any sort of strategic decision-making purposes. So if you're trying to make sense of what the market looks like, it's gonna give you a good enough understanding of it. Apart from some exceptions, so if you're looking for insight on like DLC, that's not really something that that there's enough information about. So DLC attachment rates or pricing advice and discounting advice for DLC, that's something that doesn't really exist anywhere right now. That's something that you have to do yourself. And also other platforms like Gamalytic is just Steam, understandably, because that's where all of the information lies. There's not a lot of like market intelligence services that give you a good understanding of consoles anyway. It's just very, very insular. So when we see some market intelligence companies giving estimates for big releases on consoles, and we see actuals, like it's often like 400% off. So it's like whenever you see anybody talking about estimates about console revenues or unit sales, it's probably not true. It's just probably a guess.
Excellent. So we have another question I think is pretty interesting coming in from YouTube from the Bull. Is it worth sacrificing upfront revenue to gain more sales to build a brand or studio or following versus just getting more revenue and using it to market your next game?
Yep. I mean, so my opinion, like educated guess in this situation, is that building a stronger community and a stronger following, if you have designs and plans for your studio to keep making games or your franchise to keep developing, if you want to make DLCs for your games, or if there's going to be a sequel at some point in the future, then building that following, very, very valuable. The unfortunate interplay here is that when you're thinking about shipping PC console games, it's basically still going to be Steam first. Steam has the all-powerful, all-knowing algorithm for how much visibility your game is going to get. And that algorithm, it takes into account a bunch of different features, but the most important one, and it's to a point where you can basically forget about everything else, is revenue. So if like there's some sort of a curve where if you go too far and if you price your game too low or discount it too steeply during its launch window, then you make less revenue, and that places you lower in Steam's ranking algorithms, which then makes it so that there's this vicious cycle where you only get so much visibility, you only get so many impressions and visits from Steam, and you can't claw your way out of that. You're just gonna always be on this level because that translates to some level of sales. If you priced it differently, then maybe you would end up, at a different point in this curve. You would make a little bit more money, which would then show your game to more people, which would then make it so that it's easier to build a community and a following in the future. So that's one of those easy questions that don't have an easy answer. You basically still want to maximize revenue, I think, to make it so that you have as much visibility potential as possible on Steam. But it's impossible for anybody to give you a credible model for that curve, because it's not like there's instances of the same game being shipped at different price points or at different discount depths. It just, there's game releases, and each game is so fundamentally different, and the timing of each release is so fundamentally different that it's never possible to just isolate the impact of like price or discount on a release. You can just kind of look back and speculate. Just, well, probably the $5 threshold for peak contributed to the game being popular, but did it contribute 1% or did it contribute 50%? Nobody knows.
How about exactly?
Yeah.
Right. So from Super Nerd X Dev, how does game length affect price? It seems like a game priced higher but is short in length gets backlash compared to a lower price game with a short game length, regardless of quality.
It's not as clear. So it's basically, if your game is short, people will complain about it being short no matter what the price point was. And still, if your game is great while being short, and people spend money on it because it's so compelling, then you're probably going to be fine anyway. Like Super Hot was a 2-hour long game, basically. Like a lot of people were able to play through the main campaign before the 2-hour limit for refunding the game even expired on Steam. A lot of people complained about the length. Still sold pretty well. And there's a lot of games which are even, they have a label saying this is a short game. Still sell pretty well. It's just some people want to play short games. Some people want to play long games. Some people that play long games sometimes want to play a short game. There's no definitive pattern there. In general, like there is a small sort of principle, like we do use it as a feature in some models, that playtime, if there is, it's not about like the amount of content, it's just the amount of time people spend in the game. So if there's people spend more time in the game, that correlates with commercial success odds. So it's basically but it feels sort of basically like circular logic, that if the game is fun and people spend a lot of time in it, then it's probably going to be successful commercially because it's a fun game. So there's not a lot of sort of insight from it. Make your game fun feels like a pretty bare-bone advice, really.
Excellent. Well, we have actually made it quite a ways. We're getting close to the end of the stream here. So I really just want to thank you so much, Tom, for joining us today. Your insights have been absolutely incredible. Chat has been really excited about everything you've had to say. So I think this was really a fantastic dive into the deceptively simple question: how do you price your game? It turns out that it's a lot more than it seems.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, but also that it shows the number of different tools you can use if you know about them when you're working on your game and when you're releasing your games. That if you do use them, give you an advantage. They give you some way of controlling the sort of inherent chaos that is making and shipping video games. And thank you so much, Trey. Also, like Trey, if you could put the slide on the screen just for a second. So just to plug IndieBI one last time, and to also answer some calls for like a recording later. So I'm happy to share the slides. Just send me an email to tom@indiebi.com. It's on the screen right now. The like IndieBI data platform If you're still working on your game, it's going to be useless to you, so don't worry about it. If you already shipped games, like IndieBI is for you to like have an easier time managing your catalog when it's already released. So if you already have some games that are released, give it a go. Might be useful to you, might not. If it's useful, there's a very simple voucher code for some 3 months of subscriptions. So might be useful, might not be. We will be continuing to do like talks like this and articles and whatnot to try and make it as easy for people making video games to make better and more informed decisions as possible. So like stay tuned, follow me on LinkedIn, I guess. It feels like the last social network that still works. And send me an email, say hi, ask for the slides. I'll be happy to share them.
And I also just shared in the chat, Tom did do a guest blog on the Unity blog about the subject. So definitely check that out. It is a wealth of really great information that kind of touches on what we talked about here, but a little bit deeper as well. Highly recommend that. And I also dropped the direct link to IndieBI in the chat. I'll do that again. So definitely do reach out if this topic is interesting to you. Tom is here for you. So yeah, thank you so much, Tom. It was really great chatting with you. And I just have some stuff to wrap up with the stream. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you all for joining. It was a pleasure.
All right, friends. So we are reaching the end of the stream, but I want to talk about a few exciting things in the world of Unity. You may or may not know, but it is our 20th anniversary this year. And to celebrate this weekend, we are hosting a official Unity 20th anniversary game jam. I've just dropped the link in the chat. So please, if you are up for it, join us for this weekend of fun. And our next live stream, which will be November 13th, which is next Thursday, we are going to have a 20th anniversary jam recap. We're going to go over the whole adventure of what it took to get this jam together and the shenanigans that went down this weekend. I know they haven't happened yet, but I can guarantee you there's going to be shenanigans. So please sign up for the jam. Join us for the fun, and then next Thursday, join us for this 20th anniversary jam recap. And that brings us to the end of the stream. Thank you all so much for joining us, for asking excellent, deep questions of Tom. This was so much fun. And until next time, keep creating. Bye-bye.